All right. Hi, my name is Jody Hammer, and I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about graduate school and making the case, whether or not it makes sense for you. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself very briefly. I know many of you have been on many of the other webinars, so I'm starting to shorten my intro the further we get along, but I work with Npca, the National Peace Corps Association, and I'm working in their brand new global reentry program, which is designed to help persons like you, help RPCVs with career and transition assistance. So very excited to be here with you today in this way. And I want to introduce in a moment my panelists that I have. I have a couple people who've gone to grad school, who've gone through that whole decision of making the decision of where they're going to study, if they're going to study, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves momentarily. But before we get started with that, I would like just share my screen. I'm going to put my PowerPoint up so we can have it all ready to go, and that will walk us through today. And today is really designed to be an opportunity for you to share. I want it to be all of us. Sorry, it is not getting to my one moment. There we go. All right, we'll present this thing right now. All right, and we've got it. Great. Today is really meant to be a informal discussion with some representatives, some folks who have already gone to grad school and have made that decision. And it is a difficult decision to make in many, many ways. So I want to encourage you. We have a small enough group that I think we can probably even allow folks, you can put your question in the Q&A, that's just fine, in the chat box for the Q&A section, but I really want to take questions throughout and make this a little more organic and more of a discussion. So feel free, and if it's a small enough crew, I think, Ari, I think we can probably even have people unmute and ask a question when we're in the Q&A section and such. So we'll probably try that out here today as well, okay? So great. So before we start, I just want to very briefly describe the Global Reentry Program of Npca is a new program that, as I said, it's designed to provide career and transitional assistance to the evacuees and RPCVs in general. So there's 4 pillars to it. The career services one is the one that I really work in almost exclusively, doing career webinars and talking with people one-on-one and putting together different kinds of events. We have our events page that has, you probably found this event maybe through there. It's just peacecorpsconnect.org/events, and we post all of our events. I think this week we've had 3, next week we have 4, or maybe even 5. I'm forgetting. We have a couple external ones as well on our calendar. So really excited that we have a lot of offerings for you, and thank you for joining in here. The well-being pillar is really very important, obviously crucial as well, right? Providing resources, tips, assistance to people about all aspects. But when you're coming back, it's a huge transition anyway, and when you factor in the evacuation, that's even a larger one that is just, I know, been very difficult. And so I think maintaining your well-being and accessing resources to help you is really important as well. And then finally, the continuation of service, a pillar, looking for ways that you can continue to serve in your communities back here, in your future. I know for me, my Peace Corps experience in Ecuador, I'm an RPCV from Ecuador, served from 94 through 97. It was a very formative experience for me, and one that really mapped out and really, set my course, if you will, for continued service here in the States in a variety of ways. And I'm very thankful for that experience. So that is Global Reentry. And then from there, let's just take it to what we're really talking about today, the agenda in terms of graduate school and whether or not to go, how to make that decision, all of that. And what I want to do first is allow our panelists. We have 2 RPCVs who've graciously volunteered to be here and to share their own experience. So I'd love to, I'm not sure who wants to go first between the 2 of you, but if you can just share your name, your where you served in Peace Corps and when you finished, and then maybe your graduate program that you did and what you're doing now. That would be great. Just your, where you're working now. That would be awesome. I don't know. Christine, would you like to go first, and then Ari after?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Christine Hoyman. I am in RPCV from Rwanda. I served from 2011 to 2013. I actually just wrapped up my MPH from Emory's Rollins School of Public Health. So I was in school from 2017 to 2019, and I am currently working at Usaid.
Wonderful. And by the way, you have a great event coming up next week, right? The USAID Open House. If you want to plug that.
I will be happy to. So we have had several kind of open office hour listening sessions that just give folks a chance to ask questions that they might have from various USAID staff members. I think this will be the 5th one that we've done. So we've been posting information about that in the RPCV group, Washington, D.C. group, because USAID, a lot of the staff are from D.C. And then we've also been posting in the evacuee Facebook group. And so if you are not a member of either of those groups and want the details, please let me know in the chat box and I will be sure to send them your way so you can link up with that.
And it's on our events calendar too that I just shared a little bit ago. So great. Thank you, Christine. I appreciate that. And Ari, can you go ahead and share your experience? Oh, you're on mute. There you go. Awesome.
Well, it's a good thing that I'm tech support today, so hi everybody, I'm Ari. I'm the Community Engagement Associate with Npca. I served in Swaziland, which is now known as Eswatini, from 2017 to 2019. And I got both my bachelor's degree and master's degree from Oklahoma State University.
Great, wonderful, awesome. So they'll be sharing a lot more throughout the course of this. I have some specific questions, but they're going to weigh in if there's anything as I'm going through. They are welcome to, just add points as I was indicating before. So feel free to do that as well. What we're going to do here today, we're going to talk a little bit about pros and cons, because there are. I mean, that's the truth of it, right? There are pros and cons of a graduate degree. Lots of pros and lots of cons. So it's really hard to decide if and when a graduate degree is right for you. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to also talk a little bit about choosing a major or a degree, right? A graduate degree. And I'll be definitely wanting to get the insight from our panelists on how they chose theirs. What weighed into that, right? I want to talk a little bit about doing a cost benefit analysis for graduate school, right? Like there is, and I have an article that I'm actually going to share with you, several that I'm going to share with you that go into more detail about the cost benefit analysis and how to do it for you to, think through that as well. And then talking a little bit about funding sources and how you can maybe get some additional funds and leveraging your Peace Corps service in that regard. Not necessarily accepting the first offer, but going back and seeing if there might be additional money. That's not bad to do, and I'll talk about that more. So let's go ahead and start first about talk about the pros and cons of pursuing a graduate degree and what goes into that. So there's a lot of pros, right, that I've put here, and I welcome you to add any, Christine, Ari, or any of you on the call. If there's something here that's not here, and in your mind it's another pro, put it in a chat box and just list it as pro, and then whatever that is, because that's great. This certainly isn't comprehensive of all the pros, but some of the items that I hear people talk a lot about are increasing your competitiveness, right? Because it is, let's face it, a really competitive job market. And so the master's degree can really help set you apart. Now, I do hear people as well that say oftentimes, for example, here in DC, I'll hear people say, well, everyone has a master's here, so it's not even, it's like the expectation, it doesn't even set you apart. And yes, there's a lot of people who have a master's, and I would say that like, I wouldn't say that the master's is equivalent to what the bachelor's used to be, whatever, when you're, that everyone has it. I still think it does set you apart, especially if you pick a program that complements your desired career, what you're looking to do, that gets you into that pool of having that required, background and such, right? So it can still, I think, make you competitive. Now, there's also the whole, is it the graduate degree itself, or is it the specific degree that you've gotten? And that's something that I do want to talk about very briefly. And if you all have, Christine and Ari, if you have thoughts on this, certainly, it does increase your competitiveness, I think. And whether or not yeah, I mean, it clearly, I think, can increase your competitiveness, but does it matter the degree that it's in? Does it matter if it's an MPH or something in a humanities, whatever thing? Well, it depends on the field, right? It depends on what you're going for. And I think, Christine, you can maybe talk a little more on this with your MPH, right? That's what you had gotten, which is a more specialized one. Do you want to speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, so I went to grad school later in life. I decided to work for a bit after coming back from Peace Corps before going to grad school. And I think, a piece of advice that I found really helpful that I continue to do now is when you're looking for jobs, obviously you want to look for jobs that you're interested in fulfilling like in that moment, but it's also really good to look at jobs that might be a goal for 5 to 10 years down the line and see what the qualifications there are. I knew before going into Peace Corps that global development, global health was something that I was really interested in. And so in looking at a lot of the job postings, I saw that an MPH was really a desired degree that was showing up in a lot of the jobs that I was not yet qualified for, but hopefully would be at some point. And so that was really helpful in trying to figure out when I decided to go back to grad school, what specifically I was looking for and what degree would be most useful in my field.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Another of the pros, really, that greater earning potential, right? With an advanced degree, oftentimes, and not always, right? Oftentimes comes that greater earning potential because you have that advanced degree, you have that master's. They're oftentimes willing to pay you more. There are some exceptions, certainly. And then specialized knowledge, it provides you with specialized knowledge, right? In a passion area of yours or an area that you really, want to work in, your master's can give you that experience because the master's isn't just you sitting and, listening to, or virtually nowadays, right? Where you're listening to classes and you're listening to the professor speak and you're, doing your exams and writing your papers, right? Oftentimes in your grad program, generally you have some of those practicums or you have some hands-on types of things. And I don't know if either of you can speak to, have you had, hands-on types of things, Ari, in yours? I know yours was. I think you said, was it online that you had gotten it?
Yeah, so I had a very unique pathway to my master's degree. I actually started it before I did Peace Corps and then finished it after I got back. So I only had a semester left when I got back. And it was a very decentralized degree. So there were a lot of, I had classes in political science, for example, and geology. So kind of all over the place. So I did get a lot of hands-on experience, not necessarily for the job that I'm doing now. But I think what that demonstrates in my case is my ability to expand on skills and to pursue betterment, which I think is always attractive to a potential employer. And I didn't have a lot of work experience before I did Peace Corps. So having that on my resume really helped make me a cut above since I didn't have as much work experience as perhaps other candidates.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful. Christine, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that or if it's up to you.
Yeah, I could just say quickly, I think it really depends on the program. And I think that was also really helpful advice when I was looking at different MPH programs. There are certainly some schools and some programs that emphasize more practical experience than others. And so again, it's helpful to know kind of what the end goal is post-graduation. There are some programs that were really strong in research, and I knew that I wanted to be more on the hands-on side of things. And so those schools were maybe not the right fit for me and my learning needs. And I was really looking for a program that did emphasize a lot of practical learning.
Great, wonderful, thank you. So moving forward here on the pros, another of the advantages, right, of grad school is that it can help you facilitate a major career change. And let's face it, in today's day and age, most people change not just jobs, but careers many times in the course of their lives. So getting a master's degree can help you. For example, if you're working in one field, let's say you're working in as a teacher, teaching, which is a great field, and you've worked in it for some time. So your background really shows teaching, which has a lot of skills and such, but you want to do something extremely different and you want to go into, whether it's, I don't know, finance or international finance, something very different, right? That master's degree can somewhat make up for a lack of extensive experience, or sometimes even a lack of much of any experience in the other fields. So getting that is like a start toward, you getting the competency you need, the skills, the knowledge, all of that, which will help you transition into that different field. And then for some fields, as you were alluding to, some fields it's really mandatory, right? I mean, they're for many, not all, but many, it does seem with the MPH, many of the jobs that are out there require, they'll have it not even as a desired, but as a required, or certainly if you're going into something where it's, I'm trying to think of another, like, nurse practitioner, something like that. Obviously you've got to have, that study and license and all of that. So for some, it's absolutely required. And then the last one, really, as I put down there, goal attainment, right? I want to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's it's an advantage. You can study what you want, and it helps you to attain a goal of yours, and so that's another advantage of going to grad school. The caution with that one is to look a little more at, what's your long-term, direction, if you will, as well, right? And the finances of it, because getting a grad degree because you want a grad degree is great. I mean, I'm all for, education and lifelong learning and, getting that degree, but we'll talk a little bit in a little while here on, the financing of it, because graduate school is, as I'm sure, you two would attest, and I will as well from my own experience going to grad school, it is very expensive. And that can be an issue for people, walking out with a lot of debt, all of that. So we'll get into that, but those are some of the advantages, right? Some of the cons, right, about, pursuing grad school. It's expensive, like I just said, right? You may graduate, many people do graduate with a huge amount of debt, which is hard to pay off. Anyone who has, debt from undergrad fully understands this, how long it can take to pay it off. And, it's frustrating how much you end up spending, how much more you end up spending than what you had borrowed because of the interest and all of that. Obviously I think our system is broken personally, but that's my own, there's got to be a lot of reform there. But the last thing you want to do is graduate with this huge amount of debt, where you don't really have a choice then in terms of what you do. You have to take, maybe it's the highest paying job, not the one that your heart is in, or, those kinds of things. So you want to think about ways to get around that, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. It's also time consuming, right? I don't know, did either of you continue working when you were doing your graduate program, or that's a whole different, issue as well. Some do that, but when you're dedicated to it 100%, you're busy, right? You don't have a lot of time, and so it's a significant input of time, right? Like you're putting a lot of time and money into it, so you want to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, right? Not just to, for example, not sure what else to do, right? I know I've worked with clients in the past, and they're like, well, I'm kind of thinking of grad school because I don't really know what else to do. I don't know what I want to do, and grad school is a pretty expensive, I don't know what to do option. I feel like graduate school is where you want to be a little more specialized. I mean, I was in undergrad, I was a humanities, liberal arts degree, and I was very proud of that. I feel like they taught me how to think, not what to think. I feel like, I didn't learn these formulas where, so I'm very proud of that. In grad school, you want to look at what you want to do long-term before you choose your course of study, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but talking to people and researching and all of that. So the return on investments can be kind of slow as well. I mean, it's going to take a while to pay back if you've had to take a lot of loans out. It could take a long time to pay those loans back, where, I have friends who are, far out of grad school, but they're still paying those loans. So thinking about, like when, trying to limit that amount of loan that you have to take. And we'll talk about that, being creative and trying to get some additional money and funding and all of that to avoid or to keep your loans down as much as possible. It may not be possible to completely avoid loans, but to keep them down as much as possible so you have a manageable amount. And then, yeah, like I said, yeah, the not sure, what else to do. I just covered that. So let's, are there any other cons that you can think of, or pros actually, that I maybe left off? Not only our panelists, but anyone in the, in the chat box, feel free to dump an answer in there. I'm going to try to open mine at some point here too. I will have the chat box open, but Ari, let me know if there are any coming in, and we can certainly take those. Choosing your graduate degree. So going on to talk a little bit about how do you choose what you're going to study, right? And, what program, what kind of program, all of that. So obviously first doing your research, right? Researching the programs. Well, and actually what I should have probably put even here as the first study is do your own self-assessment, right? Which it kind of goes with the match programs with your strengths, right? But looking at what you're looking for, what kinds of areas you're interested in, right? Then doing your research, or programs you're interested in, doing your research to determine what, and the research involves not only online. I mean, come on, everything's online these days. You can research so many things about the pros of whatever degree, or advantages, disadvantages, that kind of thing. What do they do? What kinds of jobs do they get, right? So you do your research online, but then you talk to professionals. I think that is so important, because it's, the book text, yeah, you can read, this, but talking to somebody who's actually made that decision and who's gone through it and is now on the other end and working, they oftentimes have really valuable insight, not only on what worked, what they liked, but what they wish they'd done differently, how they wish they had maybe financed it, or what they think they could have learned more. That can help you exponentially as you think about what you want to study and all of that. I emphasize career chats versus informational interviews. Informational interviews just doesn't roll off your tongue and it sounds very long. But if you were to say to somebody, wow, it's great that you have your degree and I'm currently considering that degree or some other related ones, and as such I'm looking to connect with professionals to hear a little more about their experience, wondering if you might have 15-20 minutes of your time at your convenience to chat about your degree, your work subsequently, any tips or advice you might have for someone such as myself. Most people love to give advice, let's be honest, right? RPCVs are very good people to approach with this. We are a family, that's 220,000+ strong. So connect with some of us, and you can do that very easily on LinkedIn. We had a separate session. You can actually watch the session. It's recorded on our YouTube station as well for Npca's global reentry page. But you can find people on LinkedIn by just going to that people search area. We're going to the search bar, right? And then doing, direct, you click on it and it'll show up, people search, or, all filters, and show all filters is great. And then just do the people one, the person. So worked at, and then in the past put Peace Corps, not Peace Corps volunteer, not whatever, just Peace Corps. And then currently works at, and if there's like a certain, place they work, or you can usually do it by search, by degree, by whatever, to find people who are in your expanded network, who maybe aren't directly connected to you yet, but who are in your expanded network. And then you can reach out to them, and don't do the generic. And what I understand is from a phone, someone just told me this, from a phone, when you go in to do a LinkedIn connection from a phone, it does not give you the option to do the tailoring, which I found hard to believe, but I trust whoever had told it to me. So make sure you're on a laptop or iPad when you're doing those, because you want to personalize it. Honestly, people, when they hear from somebody, they have no idea who it is, especially in today's world where you have so many just people hacking and just all kinds of things going on. It's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to actually open that message exponentially by putting that personalized. And that can be, hi, I'm a fellow RPCV, would love to connect with you professionally, just to really, having served in whatever, you could put where you served maybe. And then you just wait for them to accept your connection. And then you can go back with a longer message that doesn't have the cutoff, the max numbers of letters, of characters. So then you can go back and say, thanks for connecting with me, which almost makes it sound like they connected with you, but I mean, they did, but you initiated it, but then they connected. And then, so you say that, thanks for connecting with me. I noticed you have a background in your master's. I'd love to, wondering if you might have 15, 20 minutes of your time to chat about your degree and how it's helped you and whatever. I'm thinking about going to grad school. People are usually pretty open and okay. And especially now, people are lonely and trapped and isolated and even more, likely to want to help because they're, bored in their house, whatever, unless they have kids. And then, so that's something as well. And then, matching the program with your strengths kind of goes back to what I was saying in the very beginning, looking at what you're looking for. But just because you're interested in it or it sounds like a degree that would be a quote unquote good degree to have, not everyone is going to do as well in that specific degree, right? You need to have, for certain degrees, you need to have certain, for example, I know in like the MPH, there's a lot of stats, isn't there? And not stats, stats and some other things, I guess. What I'd love for you two, Christine and Ari, just to tell people in your degree, repeat your degree again, and then what were the kinds of skills or attributes that a successful candidate would have or would need to develop very quickly in the degrees that you pursued?
So I have a master's in public health, and I think the program that I was in was really focused on building both qualitative and quantitative data skills. And so I think something that's also really helpful is to try to go in knowing what your own strengths are. I did not, like, as I mentioned before, like research is great and super important. It's not something that I wanted to remain in post-graduation. And so I was really interested in seeking out some of the more applied coursework. So how to write and manage a monitoring and evaluation plan, how to do qualitative analysis, which are skills that I bring into the work that I do now. And so I think most schools do have some flexibility, most graduate programs do have some flexibility in kind of the skills offered. So it's up to you to kind of specialize. I know particular to my MPH, I am particularly focused in, my concentration was global health. And so that is something that I had to identify when I applied. Emory offers, I think, 6 specializations. And so that allows you to identify kind of what your topical focus and interests are, and the coursework that you take will reflect that.
Yep, great. Ari, how about you?
Sure. So I got my bachelor's degree in human development and family science. It was a pre-marriage and family therapy degree with an option in child and family services. So I would actually say I pigeonholed myself a little bit with my bachelor's. And so I wanted to go a little broader with my master's and give myself some more options. So I earned my master's in international development. And that was very rooted in theory and more of like a project development and research-based degree. So it's basically, can you go through stacks and stacks of information and really root yourself in an understanding of that and have a discussion on how to solve issues related to that information. So it was my degree was very text heavy, but again, it was decentralized. So I took a lot of my courses in different departments, which I think was a really good choice for me because I have an interest in a lot of small different things. So I feel almost more so in that degree, I became more of a generalist than locked in on any one specific specialty. And I think that's given me a better angle to come out in terms of job searching.
That's great. Thank you, Ari. And you bring up the point with the, like you said, getting a more diverse kind of skill set and a more general, right? Many times in jobs, in job descriptions, they don't say you have to have a master's in a specific degree. It'll say master's, or it might say master's in a related degree, which is pretty open, right? Or master's degree and like where it doesn't even say what you have to. So a lot of times regardless of what you're studying does, you can qualify for it. So, but in certain ones, obviously you're going to need the more, maybe it's the MPH, that kind of thing. So great. The next comment here, be able to pay for it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but that doesn't mean being able to like pay for 100% as you go, because that's not very common at all. I mean, some people are very fortunate and they have maybe their parents who, you know, have put aside money and are paying for their graduate degree, and oh my, you are very lucky if that's the case. Most don't have that. So looking at the creative ways to be able to pay for it, which we'll get more into, like I said, but a combination of, you know, financial aid, any financial aid that you would qualify for yourself, right? As well as scholarships, you know, specific scholarships that they have, some of the programs. So we'll talk a little more about that. And then lastly, the Occupational Outlook Handbook. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it is a source, and that's one of the links that I'm going to be sharing with you today in the follow-up email. It allows you to compare, like, you know, different industries, sectors, all of that, and it has information not only on, you know, like pay and location, a lot of different things about that occupation. And I think this is something that might be put out, I want to say DOL, Department of Labor, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's available, accessible online, and it can really help you think through, like, when you're, you know, looking at the kinds of jobs, you know, what is the required background more or less for it, and what, you know, kinds of skills. And it can help you as you think, because oftentimes many of us have an idea of what we want to do, or maybe not specifically, but you want to contribute to, you know, some organizations, you know, in whatever sector. You might know part of what you really want, right? You're passionate about, you know, immigration reform or whatever it is. And so you know that one aspect, but you have no idea all the organizations that might work in that program. But this allows you to kind of get more insight into the, you know, what's required for each of those. So it can be a good source. And then financing your grad degree. So the Peace Corps has the Peace Corps Fellows Program, which many of you may be familiar with. And that's the program where you basically come back from service. You get credit for your Peace Corps service, if you will, some course credits and such for it. And so it helps you attain the degree in less time, theoretically, right? But so you get some credit so you can get through quicker. It's a special program that's actually, Ari, do you know how many, I don't know offhand how many programs there are out there. There are, you know, hundreds. You know, universities have many, you know, each university will have many. There's a lot of different programs. I know SIT is one of the really big ones up in Vermont. American University has some. You can go to peacecorps.gov. I'm not sure. I used to work there for 12 years. Sorry, I'm going back in my recollection. If you just do a Google search, Peace Corps Fellows Program, and then you'll get it. You'll get the information on it. You'll be able to probably access their, you know, what all universities have it. It can be a great, you know, way. They basically honor and acknowledge the Peace Corps experience with special financial assistance. There's a required minimum of, and I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a required minimum amount. So if you can get any free money, that is great. So check out the Peace Corps Fellows programs. I think, Ari, you're referring to the formerly, when there was the MI program, the Master's International program, which I was also a part of years ago for my own degree. So that was a different one where you went to grad school for 1 year intensive, and then you went to Peace Corps service for your 2 years. You came back, you did your, you know, your thesis or your presentation or whatever it was in the program that you were in, and you had your master's. So it helped you, again, you got credit, if you will, for your Peace Corps service. So definitely check out those programs, because that's, you know, free money in a sense, if, you know, if you get into those programs and such. But also look at grad assistant, you know, programs, TAs, right? The teaching assistants, your research assistant, you know, depending on what your program is, right? There's a lot of opportunities that are on, you know, campus to help, you know, and those help, it's financial aid basically, right? You get paid for that. It's a job that you're doing and you're getting paid for it. So that can help keep your, you know, loans down and such. But don't forget to check employer funding. This isn't always an option. I know, I think in recent years, it's probably, some would say it's less of an option, like it's not, you know, that not as common, but there are a lot of organizations that still do. My brother actually worked at at John Deere, and he still works there, and they financed his entire MBA at Northwestern in Illinois. And it was, I mean, he came out debt free. It, you know, they did that because they chose people to put through, and then, you know, they would come back and they would work for the company for X period of time. And they would, you know, share the knowledge that they learned. And he, you know, he did it. It was amazing. And so there are sometimes programs. So check that out. Sometimes, a lot of times that's bigger companies that have the funding for that, of course, because that's, you know, no small chunk of change. But definitely check that out. Looking at part-time programs or even working full-time while you are going, I mean, there's a whole different, you know, I mean, you've got to be really disciplined and such if you're working full-time and you're doing grad school, you know, on a part-time basis, or certainly full-time, I think would be very difficult. Not that some have not done it. But looking at those ways to keep I mean, these are all ways to try to keep the amount of loan you have to take out down as much as possible. Just so that you don't have that big, you know, amount hanging over your head when you finish with your degree, okay? And then others, you know, really, you know, well, I'm going to ask you, do people in the audience, do you have any other suggestions? Are there any other ways that you've financed or you've thought about financing or you've heard that can help finance your degree? Put those in while I'm explaining this last bullet here, and then Ari can maybe feed me some of those if there are some that came through. Leveraging your Peace Corps service everywhere. By that, I mean, your Peace Corps service is golden. I mean, I'm not saying it was perfect, and certainly for the folks that, you know, got evacuated, you know, it certainly didn't end the way that you would want it to end, but you have a very compelling story, and Peace Corps service is, in general, I would say, by and large, highly regarded, right? Especially if you're able to, on your resume, articulate the kinds of things that you did or whatever, you know, to try to, you know, get when you were in Peace Corps, and if you were evacuated early, looking at your pre-service training, that kind of thing. And, you know, people generally are like, wow, you know, that's pretty amazing, that kind of experience. But one way you can leverage it additionally to see if there's additional funds, like say you've applied to the institution, they've come back with their full financial aid package, and while it's maybe decent, you really were hoping for more, right? There is nothing wrong with going back to them and saying, thank you so much for this, you know, package. I'm excited about the opportunity to study here and, you know, bring my XYZ experience and contribute blah, 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 while learning, whatever. But then say, you know, I'm wondering, some universities recognize the value, the unique value of the Peace Corps service and our skill set through specific scholarships or, you know, funding, additional funding. What, if any, such programs does your university have in that regard? And here you're putting them on the spot in a really good way, because suddenly they're being told, oh, other universities do this, can you? I mean, more or less in a nicer way. And they're like, well, let me see. And you never know. It might be the answer might remain no, and that's okay. But why not try? Because it could be yes. Well, let me see. And they might come up with an extra, who knows, 5, 10,000. It could be more, but any little bit is good. So that's what I would say about financing. Did anyone come in with any other ways to creatively finance?
We do have a few questions if we have
Okay.
time to go over those.
Before the question, one more to just put out there: crowdsourcing. You could actually crowdsource your degree. I mean, that I've heard of people who've done that, and they have a compelling story, and you might, you know, you might be able to do it. Who knows? So consider that. Okay, yes, questions, Ari.
Okay, we've got one from Karen who asks, is the PC Fellows program different from the Coverdale?
It is the Coverdale Fellows program. That's the official name of it. So if you put that in, you'll get even more directly to it. But yeah, Peace Corps Coverdale Fellows program. So thank you.
There's another question. Can you combine the Coverdale Fellowship, Peace Corps Fellowship, with another fellowship for funding?
You know, I think that would probably depend on the institution. I mean, I don't think they'd give you, I mean, if your other one was a full ride, I don't think you could do the Peace Corps Fellows and the full ride, because it would be giving you more than 100%. Do you know what I mean? But I would certainly investigate multiple. I think you could probably be I mean, you'd have to see what the requirements of it is, is it, full-time, part-time? I would pursue both and just keep them in the loop, as well. Yeah, I would probably keep them in the loop with it once you get, I mean, when they give it to you, once they offer it to you. I don't know if I'd say, well, I do have another one that is this, because I wouldn't want to give them the impression that you don't really need it. So I would probably, you could tackle that probably a couple different ways, but yeah. Excellent.
Okay. Another question, as far as job placements with prestigious agencies such as USAID,
Yeah.
does it matter where you get your graduate degree from? Does it have to be from an A-list known school?
Oh, that's a good question. Christine, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can hop in. So I had received advice from several friends who had gone through grad school when I was applying at the time, and also some of my mentors, that I should go to the highest ranked university that I got accepted into. And I think that advice is really common. Ultimately, I made a choice based on the school that was right for me, not necessarily based on rankings. There were multiple factors that I used when deciding where to go. A lot of it was finance driven, because I did have undergraduate loans at the time. So the thought of taking on even more debt was really daunting. I would say that there are also like secondary pros and cons items that I think are really important in making sure that you're happy and where you end up deciding to go to grad school. For me, I had done my undergrad in DC, served in Peace Corps, and then come back and was living and working in DC for 5 years. So I was just really bored of DC, ready to get changed, needed to get out. And the other school that, I was deciding between was just too close geographically in that area. So I thought Atlanta would be a really good change of pace. And looking back, Emory was 100% the right program for me. It ticked a lot of the boxes and the reasons that I wanted to go, that I was looking for in grad school. And so I think, my ultimate advice is hopefully you know you best. And I think it is great to solicit advice from mentors and from friends, but choosing where you go to school is such a personal choice. And I think if you walk away from grad school being really unhappy, that I believe will be reflected when you start applying for jobs. And so your employers want to see someone who is enthusiastic about the things they learn and the things that they're doing. And I would hope that the organization, regardless of where you end up, really values that over the name brand of the school that you went to.
Good thoughts. Thank you. That's that age-old question. I'm gonna, so are there any other questions that are coming in? Because that's absolutely fine.
It looks like more so comments on different funding avenues.
Okay. Well, we're gonna, this is really, looking at the cost benefit analysis, and then we'll do Q&A as well. So if there's, why don't we just go through this one slide here and then go from there. So when you're thinking about, does grad school make sense, right? Should I go to grad school? I would encourage you to do a cost benefit analysis, right? Looking at weighing the total cost that it's going to cover you, which, let's remember, is not just the tuition, right? It's the tuition, it's any of the extra fees, which in a lot of universities, the extra fees are thousands of dollars. So adding those, those fees, as well as whatever your cost is going to be wherever you're living in that, in whatever city you're living, if you're not doing an online program, you're going somewhere. How does that compare to where you're living, here? Like, oftentimes they're in big cities and maybe it's more expensive, that kind of thing. So putting all of those kinds of costs out there, costs like other secondary costs. Can anyone think of other secondary costs that might be weighed into this, depending on the school that you're going to? Drop it in the chat box if so. I actually have that open now as well. Transportation, good one, Marina. That's great. Yes, transportation. Are you living in a city where they have the, metro and all of that, where it's just that cost, or do you have to buy a car basically to get to and from campus? Those kind of things. That's a huge difference, right? Cost of living. Yep, that's another. So that's what I was a little bit referring to in that. What's the cost of living in the place that you're going to be living in? How much more expensive? All those things go into it. So when you group all of those things together, and then you look at and you compare it to the benefit, what's the benefit? And it's hard to do a specific, like, okay, this money versus this money. But when you're looking at the benefits, going back to the beginning, we were talking about what are some of the advantages of a grad degree, of going to graduate school. I mean, some of the benefits, the increased potential for earnings, right? So you may well earn more money with a master's. But remember, we talked as well about that whole, when does that happen? That might be a delayed thing. It might not be just instantly. Suddenly you get your master's and you're going to be earning X amount more, but your growth potential and, in terms of work and your salary potential definitely go up with the master's. And, factoring that in, right? Factoring, I mean, and obviously your own happiness, if it's something that you really are passionate about getting, like a degree, it may not come down to just this is such a, like, when I have this picture here, right? It's like cost, benefit, whatever, just this strict kind of, what's it going to cost? What's the benefit? And what's bigger? What's, heavier to decide which is, whatever. It could, you just are passionate about it and you want a degree, and that is a benefit. It's attaining a goal that you want, and that might be a priceless benefit. I mean, that could be a really, important one. So, looking at those comparisons and seeing what makes sense when you do this, like, cost benefit analysis. And of course, you look at how long it's going to take you the degree, so you're multiplying it by X amount. You're looking at I would factor in what's the student loan percentage. Does anyone know about what rate student loans are at? I don't know off the top of my head, but looking at what that is, because that's what, when you look in the future of how that looks and how long it takes you to pay off, or, all those things, it can be daunting. But definitely weighing that in so that you are, and then looking at, okay, if you can maybe get scholarships, things like that, ways to get that down, that can obviously ease the weight and change the dynamics here too. So are there any questions that people have on, like, the whole cost benefit analysis? And I'd be actually curious to hear from our panelists on your own experience. I mean, surely you probably went through, to some degree, this whole, okay, I know you said, Christine, on the whole major or a school, which school to go to was a big thing, but, like, how did this process look for you? Either of you.
So when I came back from Peace Corps, I knew that I wanted to stay in the field of development, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to specialize in. And because I had outstanding loans that I had deferred while in Peace Corps service, I really wanted to get a job so I could start to build up my savings again.
Mm-hmm.
And what propelled me to go back into grad school was honestly that I reached a career plateau and realized that I wouldn't be able to make significant advancements without one. And so, I didn't always know or think that I was going to go to grad school, and I felt like I was sort of pressured to, which is fine, and I'm glad that I did, but that wasn't necessarily a goal that I had right out the gate. Something that I think is important to know if you do plan to work a bit before going back to grad school is, at least for the MPH programs that I applied to, I was at least 4 to 5 years above the median age of all the programs that I applied to. I think a lot of the students went straight from undergrad into grad school or undergrad Peace Corps grad school. And so I think having a few more years experience did make me more competitive for financial aid, which was really helpful. Because I did have student loans from undergrad and then also was concerned about taking on additional debt for grad school. So that is something certainly in the favor of maybe waiting a bit before going to grad school. I also think by the time that I went to grad school, I knew very specifically what I was interested in and what particular skills within the public health space that I wanted to develop. And so that really helped me hone in on what school was the right choice for me.
Gotcha. Thank you. And Ari?
So I earned my degree through the Master's International program, which with my university, they offered a very healthy financial package along with that. And I also was able to defer other loans during my Peace Corps service. So I am in some debt, but it's not nearly as significant as it would have been without those things. I would also say, in terms of factoring in your cost benefit analysis, think about what you might want to do 5, 10, 15 years down the road. I have always wanted to stay in academia and potentially be a college professor one day. And that does require more advanced degrees that are more theory and research based. But for somebody who doesn't necessarily want to do that, it might not make as much sense to put all of that money into advanced degrees. Yeah, so keep that in mind as well.
Thank you very much. And with that, it brings us to our formal Q&A, just any questions that haven't been addressed yet. And I see, I was just looking up here, sorry, I was just looking up in the chat thing, and I saw the really good comment. Christine, your comment was great on the, you know, like the financial aid and the, you know, what was helpful and how you yeah, just read those. I do want to let folks know, you might want to save, you can save the chat box, the chat that's been going on, because there has been some really good suggestions and some links and things. Just go to your chat box area and the little 3 dots that are inside the box on the bottom right hand corner. Click on that, and the first option will be to save chat. And when you download Zoom, I guess, on your laptop or whatever, it has a place where it saves it, a folder that it saves it in. So there's a couple other ones that look like they've come in. Somebody did ask about whether or not, I don't know if that question was answered, Ari, about whether or not you could get a fellowship if, does it cover tuition even if you do grad school online? That was from Cielo. I'm not sure on that one. The fellowship, like the Peace Corps Coverdale Fellowship, you'd have to check with them on that, and probably with any other institution. If you were looking at doing, of course, right now everything's online, but in terms of like long-term once it eventually opens up. So I do see there's 2 other questions on the bottom, maybe. Let's see. How important is it to go to a grad school in the city you want to work or live in? Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see here. I would say, I mean, I think it depends, again, I mean, and so much of it depends on your degree, right? But if you're, I mean, there are certain, I will say there are certain, from my experience, and then I want to get your opinion, Christine and Ari, if either of you have an opinion on this, but there are certain cities, right, where a lot of the work might be in, like there's a lot of international development work here in DC, right? So they obviously are very familiar with the top producing, you know, like schools, right? Many of which are here, but some are in other areas as well. But the advantage of that, of going to school somewhere where it's where you want to be working, is the networking aspect. When you're already there living and studying and, you know, making connections, you're in the environment that you want to live in. But I don't think it's essential. Certainly, I think, you know, depending on the university you went to and all of that, you can certainly get there after as well. So I would love either of you to weigh in on your opinion of that.
Yeah, I can touch on that a bit. I think, Jody, echoing what you said, is also another factor I think that makes it a pro would be you don't have to take the time and the money to make that move. Moving is extremely expensive and very time consuming and annoying, and you have to rebuild in terms of personal happiness, you have to rebuild your friend group if you don't necessarily know anybody who lives in that city. But yeah, and it just depends. For me, it was a personal happiness thing to not live in Oklahoma after graduation. And I'm someone who likes to move around a lot. So that's also a factor, is if you've been in one place for a long time and you want to try something new, it might also be a pro to not get your degree in the city or state you want to.
Right. Good point.
It's a personal choice, I think, as well.
Great. All right, Christine, you're welcome to weigh in, but either way, let's see, are there any other questions in here? And then we'll, several have just said, thanks, feel free to connect. Yeah, we've put our contact information here, so folks can follow up with us individually. Thank you, both of you, for putting that and being willing to share that. That's great. If there's any other final questions, we are at the top of the hour, my goodness, ending almost perfectly on time. Hi. Wonderful. So if I'm willing to certainly stay on for a few minutes extra to answer any questions. What I think I'll go ahead and do is stop the recording now, and then people, certainly you're welcome to leave if you need to go and do your next thing, but if you do want to stay on and you have other questions, please feel free to do so, and we're happy to help with that as well. So thanks for coming today and for spending some time with us. And please take a moment when you do get the follow-up email to there's a very brief evaluation, super fast, not even 30 seconds. And you will also see the resources that I mentioned. They'll be included and linked there. And then the upcoming events. We have a very busy week next week, so lots of good things. So hopefully you'll tune in for some of those, okay? And wishing you the best. All right. Thanks.
I'll also just say, if there were any questions in the chat that we didn't get to, please repost them. Sometimes it's really easy to lose those questions in the text box.
Yep. Thanks so much. That's great.
Go ahead and put it in the box again.
Thanks.